Hello and welcome to the Mixed Dandelions podcast. This is a podcast about growing up mixed, military, and moving on. I'm Jennifer, so let's get started. This is my very first guest host episode, and today my very first guest host is my sister Karen, and we'll be talking about living in Okinawa as teenagers. Say hi, Karen.
Hello.
Some background on us. Karen and I are the two youngest of 5 kids. So it was just us during my dad's last duty station in Okinawa, Japan. We were both born in the Army hospital that was on Camp Kui, the old hospital that's now Camp Lester. Our dad is of French-Irish descent, and our mother was born and raised in Okinawa, Japan. We moved back this summer before my junior year of high school, and I don't remember, what grade were you in or going into? Do you remember?
Coming back?
No, going to Okinawa.
I was going into 8th grade.
Yeah. So, and then before that, we were at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. Like I said, Okinawa was our dad's last duty station before he retired from the Air Force after serving for 30 years. And then although technically we were stationed at Kadena Air Base, we were living on Camp Foster because there was no E9 housing available in Kadena. That pretty much sums it up, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you didn't write down your bio in our little Google Doc, so why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm not very good at this, clearly.
So introduce yourself, whatever you want everybody to know.
Well, I don't know. So my name is Karen. You already pretty much said our background. I live in Florida. I have a degree in communications, although by doing this, you wouldn't be able to tell. I have 2 kids.
Alrighty. Okay, and then how do you self-identify racially and or ethnically?
Okay, so that's always tricky, right? Like when people ask how you self-identify, like there's always the racial aspect, the ethnic aspect, and maybe I guess the nationality aspect, right? So it's always like a tricky thing to answer. So just to cover all bases, obviously nationality wise, I'm American and I identify strongly with that. When you dive a little deeper and you start asking about racial or ethnic, I identify as Japanese and Caucasian, right? And then if you go in a little bit deeper and we get into a deeper conversation, then I would say more specifically Okinawan and probably mostly French on our father's side, if we're talking ethnically. So I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like that on his side, the French aspect was just more prevalent than anything else. So since our grandmother's first generation French. So
yeah, I agree. Cause because it was like when people ask me, I'll be like, oh, well, I'm like half Okinawan or Japanese and half white. And then if they ask like, oh, well, what's the white side? And I'm like, oh, French Irish. But I think, like, that makes sense because like Grandma King would just like she would teach us some songs in French and Papa spoke French, not to us, but we just heard more about the French part, the French side of our family. So I
mean, even the fact that we call him Papa, which is a very Americanized, version, I guess, of Papa. Like we don't call him Dad and when we talk about his family, I just remember everything just being very French and Francophone. Like even I remember the first song I ever learned as a kid was Frere Jacques from Grandma, and that was literally the first lullaby or child's nursery rhyme or whatever it's called that I can't even recall learning. So
and then even like our great we use was it Tan for
Tanjan for our aunts and uncles on that side. So
and then and I remember Grandma taught us like some words in French, so then which was very helpful when Manny and I went to France as part of our honeymoon. So I was just like, there you go. Yep. Yeah. So then I would agree. All right. So all right, so let's start. So so we were at Scott Air Force Base for 4 years. For me, I felt like that was like 1 year too long. So I was excited when we were leaving because we were always like 2 years or 3 years. And so we were there 4 years. So then, and luckily, Papa was able to continue to stay in the Air Force and we were able to go. And then when we moved to Okinawa, so I guess, do you remember what your first thoughts were when they told us we were going to be moving to Okinawa?
I don't specifically remember my first thoughts. I was young, but I remember like the feeling around the move, right?
Mhm.
Because we moved a lot, because of the nature of his job, right? We were
Right.
used to moving, but as you get older, I think you become more aware. Because you make better friends, you're older, so you understand more. So I don't remember the initial thought, but I do remember feeling like kind of sad and like, oh man, like I've made friends here and now I have to leave. And, I was in the middle of that whole preteen angsty thing.
Oh
So,
yeah.
it was such a big deal to leave and, oh my God, I'm never going to see you again. And, we didn't have social media back then or the
Right.
emails or anything. So when you were leaving, you were really leaving. Like you probably really were there. The idea of actually speaking or talking or even seeing these people again, just, it wasn't a reality. Like you knew this would be the last time you would talk or see this person. So, and at 12 years old, it was just like tragic. So that's what I remember feeling when we were moving. So
See, and for me, yeah, like I feel like it was opposite. I mean, I had just gotten out of 10th grade. Like I said, like since I was older, I guess I was so used to us leaving every 2 or 3 years, and we were there for, and I was just like, okay, when are we going? Like seriously.
right.
Like I was gonna miss my friends, and but I still like I liked moving around. So I was just like, okay. And then, yeah, and I don't remember like feeling like as far as it specifically being Okinawa, I don't remember like, oh, yes, it's Okinawa. I
Right.
was just like, okay, yeah, we need to move now. It's
Right.
like
Another
about that
place.
time.
Yeah.
So, all right. So when we first moved to Okinawa, like I remember some random things like going out to Gate 2 Street or, and mom like taught us how to say, I don't understand Japanese, because she was like, a lot of people are going to start talking to you in Japanese. So you need to know this. And so what were your impressions when those first few weeks that we were in Okinawa?
It's so funny. And like, cause I'm older now, right? So hindsight is everything, but I was 12, right? When we went. So honestly, I remember getting there and it was raining, right? And it was,
Oh, yeah.
we got there at night and I remember it raining. And I remember, we stayed at the Hershey on Kadena, which was
Yeah.
the
It's
temporary
funny you
living
remember
facility.
the name. I don't remember the
Yeah,
name.
yeah. I remember that. And I remember you and I had our own room that was like
Mhm.
connecting to to mom and papa. But I just remember everything was different in the aspects of like the TV stations. I remember getting there, it was raining and I was already feeling kind of like sad. And then we go in there and we turn on the TV and there's one American channel. What was it? FEN, I think. The Far East
AFN, I
Network.
think, or was
AFN,
it
yeah.
something like that?
There was like one channel. And then so I was like, there's one American channel and it had like the soap operas, which at the time, I don't know why I was
Yeah.
watching those at 12, but I was. But and I just
That's how
remember
mom learned English, right? Like,
yeah, they were like
Jenny
6
Jones,
months
General
delayed.
Hospital.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were like 6 months delayed. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is what I'm coming to. Like it's raining and then we don't even have a TV and the cars, why are all the cars so small? Like very superficial things that I thought about when we were there. I mean, now that seems so ridiculous and silly, but that my 12-year-old self, that's what I was thinking.
I do remember it was raining. I remember there was a gecko in the bathtub and we were freaking out because we're like, there's a lizard in the bathtub. And mom and papa were like, it's a gecko, like just take it out. Like we were like, we're not touching a lizard. And I remember too, like when we started like walking around Kadena Air Base, like it was hard to cross the street, right? Because they
yeah,
live on
I
the
remember
other
that
side
too.
of the
It's funny
street.
that you say that now. I do remember that now that you say it.
And then or like I just remember being tired and thinking it's hot. Like it was just so hot and humid. And then, like our sunglasses would fog up as soon as we stepped outside. And then, like you and I, like it was cool because you and I mean, we're 3 years apart. So we could just like, and it was just us at that time, not the other three. And so we were just like walking around together all of the time. And like, I remember seeing bats and like, there'd be swarms of I think like dragonflies or something, and they would just like, but then they'd split as soon as because mom would be like, no, just keep walking. I was like, no, they're gonna like attack me. But no, and then we started going off base, right, to visit, to go to grandma and grandpa's house. And I thought that was kind of that was always like a fun little adventure sometimes, because we always took the bus, or the majority of the time we would have to take the bus there. And mom's like, I don't know, let's just get on this bus and figure it out.
Yeah, I remember the bus situation very well.
And then we're like, what do we do with the money? Like, when do we put the money in? And yeah, that was all. But then, like, so I remember too, like we'd go out to Gate 2 Street, right? And I felt like that was, and we didn't.
The coolest.
I
thought it was the coolest at the time, again, superficially.
Well, and I remember Papa was like, oh, you cannot talk to any Marine, because I was like 16, I think. So you can't talk to any Marines. They're all animals. They just want to fight. And I was like, you're exaggerating. Marines probably aren't going to fight that much. And then as soon as I said that, across the street, 2 Marines got into a fight.
Right, yeah.
He's like,
that's so funny.
I was just like, okay, maybe 2.
I like Gate 2 Street because remember they had all the stores that had the clothes and like the name brand clothes. Yes, and the food. And so I was, again, 12 years old. I was like, what was the thing that was in at the time? Cross colors. They had like a whole store that had like cross colored jeans and shirts. And I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to buy some and take pictures and send them to my friends and back in Illinois. And yeah, again, superficially, that's what I remember about Gate 2 Street.
I loved the food, like the little yakitori stands.
Yeah.
Oh,
again, older me does appreciate that. Younger me, I was all about the cool clothes that probably weren't even real. Now that I think about it,
I don't.
They weren't real. I was just so excited though about it. So yeah.
Yeah, but they wouldn't know that, right? People in the States. All right. So how do you, I guess, favorite things to do in Okinawa. Let's talk about that. What were some of your favorite things to do back then?
Because it's changed. My experience there, I was so young. Once I made friends, it was just hanging out with my friend, right? Like, and I think that no matter where I would be, that would probably be what it is, just because of the age that I was at, like anything that me and my friends did, it was cool. Like we used to, like me and Liza, we used to go to the base after school, like the Burger King. That was like the spot to hang out, right? It was the Burger King and the Baskin Robbins on base. That was our idea of fun. You know what I mean? Or sometimes we would go to the youth center on Leicester, which was Cooey, which is now Leicester. We went to Leicester Middle School, so we would walk across the street to the youth center, right? And we would do stuff like that. So during that time, again, I didn't appreciate really where I was at. That changed obviously in our time there, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But initially, those were the things that I just looked forward to, so.
Yeah, I always found it weird that like when we went to Shuri Castle, like last time we visited, and you're like, oh, I've never been to Shuri Castle. I was like, right. You've never been to Shuri Castle. Like it was like my 4th or 5th time being there. And I had
never been there ever, except
it's like those things like, and we'll talk about it later, but like those things that like you realized, I think, that it's like, why didn't I do this? But we were young stupid kids that
definitely
didn't appreciate.
I just remember you used to go to the beach a lot.
Yes, girl, I would still go to the beach a lot.
I remember you would be at the beach all the time. I remember you came back one time with you had the nicest tan for 4 months.
I remember one time I got so burned, like head to toe, because I was out there just for hours. And fine, I was like, but I still wanted to keep going. And so mom lent me one of her thin jackets to wear because I was so burnt. And I was like, but the sun is really hot. Right. But I still wanted to go hang out at the beach. I still love, that's just my favorite thing. It's still
so it's so funny that you say that, because you just reminded me of something that I noticed. One of my first impressions of Japan. And again, this sounds so silly now, but I remember going there, and I remember seeing off base, Japanese women would have umbrellas. Yeah. Even though it was sunny, and I had never seen that before. Or they would wear masks, or they would have umbrellas, or they would wear gloves when they drove. And I just thought it was the weirdest thing. And I never really asked, I don't think, until one day mom did. Like we were walking off base and she had an umbrella and I was so embarrassed. I was like, Mom, why do you have an umbrella and the sun is out? And so, you know, she starts telling me to protect you from the sun. And then she starts telling me why they wear gloves. And, you know, if somebody feels like they have a cold, they'll wear a mask. Like, and so she starts explaining these things to me. And I just remember that being the first time I had ever seen anything like that. Like, and I remember being so embarrassed because she was walking around on a sunny day with an umbrella. When you said that, I remember right. That I was like, I walked like 10 steps behind her because I was like, oh my gosh, she looks crazy. She's carrying an umbrella and it's not even raining.
Oh my goodness.
And now though, I think it's so smart, right? Like that's why their skin is like so immaculate. They just know how to protect themselves from the sun. But it just, at the time, again, you just said it and it just kind of triggered that thought.
But yeah, we were stupid little kids, so
yeah, for sure.
All right, so this one's a little more, I guess, in depth. So how do you think living in Okinawa, when we moved to Okinawa, shaped or changed or had any kind of effect on your ethnic identity and how you identified as Japanese or Okinawan?
It was pivotal for me. I can honestly say that if there was any moment in my life that impacted how I view my identity, in that context, it would be moving to Okinawa and my experience there. I mean, because growing up, and I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what you say, because, you know, we grew up in the same household, but with, you know, the same parents and the same experiences. But like growing up, I don't ever remember race or anything like that being a thing. Like it was never like, we grew up in such a diverse environment always, that even like I knew my mom was Japanese, right? And I knew my dad, you know, but it was just never discussed in the context of you're different, or, you know, this is what that means. I remember actually being in Illinois, and I remember, and I don't know why I remember this, but I had a vocabulary word for school and the word was origin. And I asked Papa, you know, how can I use the word origin in a sentence? And he said, you can say, my mother is of Japanese origin. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to use it that way. It has to make sense to me. But, and I always remember that, but it's interesting because we just never talked about it in that way. Not because it was hidden or there was any shame. It was just, everything was so inclusive. You know, we always had like a really diverse group of friends. Our parents had diverse group of friends. You know, we grew up in the military where there was so much diversity. Like diversity was the normal thing, right? And so
I agree.
Moving to, you know, but we always had aspects of Japanese culture in our house. But again, it was life for us. It was just normal. So I didn't think of it in any other way. So then we, you know, fast forward, we moved to Okinawa, and that just changed everything for me. Even in the context of, you know, if you had asked me before, I would probably say, oh, I'm Japanese and white. And I probably still would say that. But the deeper we get into a conversation, I would say specifically I'm Okinawan.
Yeah. And
I didn't even realize there was a distinction until I moved there. And I would remember, you know, mom all of a sudden speaking a third language. And I was like, you speak a third language? Like, you know, when she's explaining to me, it's the Okinawan dialect, or, you know, and I'm sure this happened to you too, walking on base, right? When we would have to walk on base, the security guards were local nationals, and they would typically ask me, you know, are you Japanese? And I would say, oh yeah, you know, my mother. And they would say, oh, Japanese or Okinawan? And I remember being like, is there a difference? Like, do you know what I mean? And then once I learned, I was like, oh, there is a difference. And especially people on Okinawa or in Japan, for them, it's a difference. You know, I mean, they're all Japanese, but they definitely identify, you know, I'm Okinawan versus I'm from Japan. And that just opened up a whole different way for me to look at it. I mean, even now, if I meet another Japanese person, I'll ask them, oh, like, where in Japan are you from? Because there's definitely a distinction. And again, these are not negative things, right? Right. We're just talking about, you know, how we identify and what we learned about ourselves. And that, to me, it was like instrumental. Like it really set that was the beginning of me really understanding my background and who I was, and really being immersed in that side of my culture. So I don't know if it was the same for you, but that's how it definitely was for me.
No, I agree, because yeah, like, and that's one of the things that yeah, like growing up in the military, you have friends, like it's normal to see the interracial families and
Right.
you know, everybody, and and then yeah, like we had those little aspects of Japanese culture or traditions in our home, but it wasn't like, it was more American, and we didn't have like I feel like we didn't have a lot of it. But then we moved to Okinawa, and all of a sudden it was like, yeah, bam, like mom got more into it. Yeah, like we all of a sudden started hearing her speak the Okinawan dialect. And like, it was just funny because we knew they were talking about like gossip or something when they switched to that. So that, you know, the kids couldn't understand. And then, yeah, like I ended up taking Japanese classes in high school with that. And so like I could learn, you know, and I've unfortunately forgotten a lot of it, but no, I think, and even just like learning the traditions, like getting the otoshidama for New Year's, and
right.
Or like when we'd have our family over for like Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner,
Right.
and like they've never had some of the normal foods, but like, and even still, like mom makes Japanese food and American food, because like that's something that Manny, like when him and I first started dating, like he's like, why is she making like hot dogs with fried rice?
With fried rice.
Well, because
she can make anything from anything. Let's
I
just be honest.
I was like, maybe you don't like, you know, the traditional whatever she made, that Japanese food, so she wants to make sure you got food you like. But yeah, no, and I think as being closer there, and then even with like the shrines and grandma and grandpa, and then their house, and they had a very traditional Japanese house with the tatami mats and the doors,
no chairs,
the rice paper, yeah, and everything. They had the shrine thingy in the, I don't remember what it was called, but no, and I think that, yeah, like that's what started like getting me thinking about more things. And then I think leaving had me thinking even more. And then, yeah, like as you get older, you start thinking, I should have appreciated certain things.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like, I was there. You had mentioned learning Japanese. I was there and I took Spanish. You know, and it's such a missed opportunity. But again, you know, I fault my young self, right? But I didn't know better, right? But I remember, you know, my friends were taking Spanish, so it's like, oh, I'm going to take Spanish. But you know, I had such an opportunity, you know, to learn it. But again, I just wasn't in that mindset, at least not when we first got there. Obviously, when we were leaving, it was much different. And like you said, even afterwards, like, you know, I think back, like, oh man, like I could have, should have, would have, did all of those things differently. So, you know, yeah, but for sure, that is what catapulted me into even thinking about myself in a different light, you know, and learning about like my culture and things like that, and identifying in that way. So
I think even realizing too that there was a difference between Japanese and Okinawan. Like,
yeah, that was huge for me. That was like that was huge for me. I was like, what?
And how Okinawans, yeah, they have like their own distinct language. They have their own distinct culture. Like there's a whole history.
Right.
And yeah, I think with the Ryukyu kingdom and the traditions of it, and even like religions and the culture, and yeah, I think that was, and even now, like that's stuff that like I'm really trying to learn more about and connect with.
Yeah, I mean, even I remember, I mean, this was years after we left Okinawa. I took a Japanese class in college, and my early years of college, and I remember my teacher was Japanese from Japan, and you know, we were talking, and I told her my mother was Japanese, and I hadn't even mentioned that she was from Okinawa yet. I said, yeah, you know, my mother is Japanese, and she asked me what her family name was, and I told her Tamashiro. She knew just by her family name that she was Okinawan. Yeah. She said, "Oh, your mother is from Okinawa," and I was like, "Oh, you know that just from her
Japanese last
name?"
Yeah, I had a Japanese teacher. The exact same thing happened.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting. I was like, "Wow." And so even then we're talking like, even, you know, we've left, you know, and I just learned so much. Like I didn't even know that was a thing. And so I asked mom, and she was like, yeah, you can tell an Okinawan name. And even our grandma, you know, mom's mom, you know, I was like, well, what was her maiden name? And she says, Arakawa. That's a very Okinawan name, you know? And I was like, oh, like, I just found it so interesting that they can tell just by the last name that whether you're Japanese or you're Okinawan Japanese. It blew my mind. I don't know, for me.
like, yeah, and I think that our family is like more, at least mom's side of, because all of her family is, well, with the exception of we have one aunt in on the main island, but
Right.
and a couple cousins up there. But like when we did that like that DNA testing, and it says like Southern Japanese island, Okinawa, and there's no other places, whereas in like when we have that French side or the Irish or the Scottish or the English or even the American side, like they have, you know, different areas that it pins.
Right.
And then like I started listening to this new podcast about Okinawan identity, and they talked about I think it's called Hajichi, it's hand tattoos that in like the like, I mean, years, hundreds of years, or, you know, like 200 years ago, it was practiced, but then it became outlawed in Japan and Okinawa in the I think early 20th century, so the early 1900s. And I asked mom about it. She's like, I don't know what that is. And then she's like, well, I remember my grandma, so our great grandmother, she's like, she had a lot of like dark tattoos on her hand. And I was like, oh, and that was a very Okinawan, I guess, thing. Like, I don't know a whole lot about it, but like from listening to this podcast, I guess, yes, like it was, that sort of like identified you as being Okinawan, as in contrast to being Japanese, like from the main island. But no, I think that, yeah, like I think that living in Okinawa, I think like moving there, we were very fortunate to be able to do that with, and then to see our family, and then to be able to connect with that part of ourselves.
No, absolutely. Like I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because that move and my time there was instrumental in who I am today. Like if I'd never lived there for, I mean, various reasons, but that I don't think I would be the same person as I am
think
today.
And then we've been lucky to be able to go back. I mean, I think you've been able to go back more than me. I've only been back twice, and then I was able to take both of my kids, and finally my husband, after some guilt tripping, got him to spend those thousands of dollars. But no, and he loved it. I mean, because it's just, I don't know. I like Okinawa is my favorite place to live. And like my original goal was to move back to Okinawa. And but you know, it just didn't work out. But like, no, and I had thought about, even like with the pandemic, like since I was working remotely, the kids were I had thought about like going back, but then my concern was like medical care. Yeah, and just sitting on the beach most of the time. That was the goal. But that didn't happen. But no, and like every time we go back, I feel like things have changed. And no, like I wish I had gone back sooner than I originally did, but there's just always something new to learn, and something new to do that we didn't, when we were teenagers, we didn't, I guess, appreciate enough, or like have that mindset, or even being old enough to do.
No, I agree. So
yeah. Let's see. Was there anything you didn't like about Okinawa?
Not anything, you know, that stands out in my mind. Like not anything big enough that it would be like, oh, so yeah, this was the thing I didn't like. I love Okinawa. Like I said, when I first got there, there were those things like, oh my God, there's only one American channel, or, oh, wow, the only restaurant we have on base is like Burger King. You know, it's those very superficial, that has all changed. Obviously you can go there now and there's like a Chili's, and there's like all kinds of things on base, and they have cable, and all of that has changed. But again, at 12 years old, those were the things that I remember being like the worst. But as an adult, honestly, there was nothing that I can think of that I just disliked, like, you know what I mean? Or that I just didn't like about the place. So honestly, I can't even think of anything.
I can't either. Honestly. Like even like the weather and like all that, it's just how they have, you know, last time we went, like at the hotel, there were like the tsunami areas, like if there's a tsunami, like, and I don't remember seeing any of that kind of stuff.
I don't either. I don't remember that at all, you know?
So, but yeah, it's just funny, those kinds of things. No, I miss Okinawa, but it's funny because every time, like the 2 times that I did go back, there were like little things that I just don't remember, like the shikwasa fruit. I'm like, I don't remember ever having that.
Never. I don't remember hearing about it.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
there was something else. And I was just like, yeah, I don't remember. And then it was like, I would get upset because then we were trying to find more like traditional things like the kokeshi dolls or something, and we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find them. It was
Right.
all the more modern westernized things. And I was like, man, I think we would have to like, yeah, like go up north more. So I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, that sucks that yeah, but it was still, yeah, Okinawa is still, yeah, my favorite place. I'm glad
Yeah.
that I was able to experience it at the age that we did.
I
Um,
noticed too, going back, this most recent time that we went back a few years ago, like they are actually starting to incorporate more of the Okinawan, traditional Okinawan like language. Like you see all the shirts that say like Haisai,
oh yeah,
that's Hogan, right? Like, so they're trying to, and they never did that when we were there. Like that was never
yeah,
like a thing. Even the language was limited to mostly the older generation, right? But now it's a part of, like I don't want to say it's touristy, because and maybe it is, I don't know, but you can walk around and you see that they advertise the traditional Okinawan things. You can buy t-shirts that have like Hogan words on them. And I think it's great. I mean, hopefully that will maybe like cause it to resurrect and kind of come back and the younger generation can learn more about it. But I don't remember seeing that at all when we were there either. Like
yeah,
earlier when we
no,
lived there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think even mom said that like yeah, like the Okinawan dialect, usually it was just older people that spoke it.
Mm-hmm.
And but like yeah, that one like I said, like as I'm like trying to like learn more about the Okinawan identity and stuff, and I guess there is a movement starting with younger people that are trying to connect more with the more Okinawan traditions and the Okinawan
Mm-hmm.
language, previously to World War II, because a lot of that died out during World War II and after. So but no, I think from what I've heard is that
Yeah.
there is a movement starting with a lot of the younger generation to keep that going. Because if you don't, it's just, yeah, it's going to die
It just
out.
dies
And
out.
then
Yeah.
who's
No,
going to
I think it's
remember it?
great. I
So
think that's
yeah, I do
great.
too. But let's see. Yeah, we already talked about some of the other things. I guess just, so how did you feel when we left Okinawa and had to
Um,
move? Because you about to
I
be a
was,
junior or about to be a
I was,
senior?
yeah, I just got out of 10th grade. I think I was like 14 going on 15, maybe 15 going on 16. I don't remember. It was either 14 or 15. Um, that was hard. That by
Yeah.
far, as many times as we moved in our lifetime up to that point, that was by far probably the most difficult transition for me. Was leaving. I mean, and it was infused with a lot of other transitions happening. Papa was retiring from the military. We were going. He was moving into civilian life, which meant that by default we were moving into
Yeah.
civilian life, and I never thought about it at the time. I mean, again, I was younger, I was a teenager, but I underestimated the difference, I think, between growing up around a certain community, like the military community, and being around, going to school with other military kids, being in the Dodge schools and all that. It was so different. Like, going into a school where the nearest military base was like 60 miles away, and you're now going to a school with kids who grew up together and have already formed these relationships and they don't want new friends, like, you know what I mean? And whereas before, we moved around a lot, and a lot of people always say like, oh God, wasn't that hard? Wasn't it, you had to leave your friends and things like that? But we were all in the same boat, right? We were all moving there for the first time. We all were making new friends. We all came from somewhere else. But now I kind of went to a high school, and everybody already knew each other, and the dynamic was different. And like I said earlier, we came from a background of a lot of diversity, and it was just very different at this school. The school was predominantly white and Hispanic. I honestly can't even think. I can think of maybe one or two other Asian people that I even saw at that school. So yeah, that was a really difficult transition for me. I mean, I adapted like we always have to, but was difficult for me. I imagine for you too, because at that time you were an adult, right? You were going into college.
Yeah, and
right?
I remember you. I mean, and you made a lot of like really good. Like you've got like lifelong friends that you've made in Okinawa that you are still good
my
friends
best friends
with now.
Yeah, two of my best friends are from Okinawa. Before social media, before all of that, Liza and Co. Like I've known them since I was 12 years old, and we moved from countries and states and cities, had no social media. We just kept in touch via mail, like letters. We would write letters and used to buy the phone cards. Remember the long distance phone cards?
Oh my God.
I mean, this is how we kept in touch. The three of us kept in touch. And to this day, they're two of my best friends. They're my kids' godparents. So
you would rack up that bill on Mom and Papa's credit card.
Yeah.
I think one time it was like
trouble.
$900.
Yeah, and that money that I had in an account from when I was younger, all my birthday money, they were like, nope, I remember them taking me to the bank on base and they were like, we're going to withdraw this money and you're paying for this bill. Those were the days.
Did you just go buy a phone card?
Yeah, those were the days. But, that's what we had to do back then. But yeah, I mean, that transition though for me was very difficult to go to Arizona. And no offense to Arizona, because and again, as an adult, I really appreciate Arizona and everything it has to offer. But at the time, it was very difficult for me to move from that military mindset, background, atmosphere to go to like a civilian school. It was really hard for me, actually.
No, and I think because it was very different, and Luke Air Force Base was 50 miles away and we rarely went there. And then even when we did go there, we didn't know anybody there. We just went to the BX or the commissary or something. But I think because I was almost 19 when we left and Papa retired, and I was so sad. I mean, not just because like boyfriends and whatnot, but like I really liked being there, and I liked like going to the beach, and I like going to the clubs, and like it was just nice. And then I'm young, and like you just want to continue that, but I loved living there. And then I started like, since I was out of high school and I was able to drive now, since I was over or I was 18, and I think I was just starting to appreciate things and like starting to want to go do things that I didn't do when I was younger. And then now I could, because like I could just rent a car, or I can, borrow Mom and Papa's car or something, or if I had a boyfriend who had a car, and then we had to leave, and I was just like, okay, this sucks, but it's another move. But then, and that's going to be mine and yours next episode together is talking about Arizona and retirement. So that'll be like a few episodes later after this one. But that'll be our next topic for us to discuss. But it was rough. And then, but I'm still like, we're so blessed to have gone there, I think, to help to be able to connect with all of that and the experiences that we had. And like the friends that we made and like you made. I mean, they're like family. Right. So, but
I mean, and if we're talking about identity, like I said earlier, being there was instrumental, right? Like I went there and left there like with a totally different mentality, right? And
agree,
concept of myself. And so then, had maybe I not had that experience, because like you said, we've moved around a lot. We lived in England, and then we would go to somewhere like North Carolina, and we've moved around a lot. We've always had to adapt. Things always change, and it's always a transition. But this just was different because I was different. I was older, right? But I just looked at the world differently, right? And so going, coming out of that environment and now going into a brand new environment, not even a new military environment, because I feel like I could have taken my experiences in Okinawa to a military environment differently. I think maybe it would have transcended and translated differently, but having all of this new awareness and knowledge and understanding, and being that young and just kind of wanting to live this new part of me, and then going there, it was like, no. like it was just like a totally like, it was just, I was totally out of place.
I agree.
I felt like such an outsider. It was just such a difficult a transition for me doing that. It was just it was just crazy. But I think that just goes to speak to how impactful being in Okinawa was
Yes.
to me and who I am as a person. It was so instrumental in shaping the way that I think about myself. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Hopefully we can all make a big family trip again. I always say, oh, that's probably going to be the last time. And then we like start planning another one.
Yeah, that makes me sad that mom said that last time. She was like, oh, this will probably be the last time. I'm like, no, let's buy a house here. Let's buy an Airbnb and like, let this be ours. I always would like to have a connection. I mean, we have family, all of our mom's side is the family is there, but I would love to have a connection there. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like a house, like we have the house there and the family house there. I would like to keep that in our family if possible. Right. I'd always like to have some type of connection there to be able to kind of go back to, we're military kids. We don't really have roots, but if I did have roots, it would be there.
Yeah. So. I usually say that I'm from Okinawa, but no, Manny, he's already like, when we were there, he's like, oh, we're coming back. We're coming back, but without kids. And then it's funny too, because like mom had told me that like she had never been to the main island except on layovers. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, I guess that sort of makes sense, like the time that you were there. And when I think about it, the only time I was besides a layover on the main island of Japan was the Far East tournament with Kubasaki when we went to I think it was Yokota Air Base. And so and and like we had thought about doing, a few days on the main island before going to Okinawa with the last time. We just, money and stuff we couldn't do, but no, it'd be nice to try to do that too. But no, I agree. Like, yeah, that's why I wanted the first episode to be about Okinawa, because for me, it's a very special part of my life and a part of our identity. And
definitely. Even, because you're right. I've never been to mainland Japan except for the airport, but then you talk about Okinawa, and then there's like all these other outlying, like Miyako Island and all these other like really beautiful places that I really want to go
we
to.
Didn't go. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, I lived there and we never took a ferry to, that island. Like
we need to do that.
So that's something I really want to do. Or even like exploring the northern part of the island. We were pretty much, we stayed pretty much on the southern or central part of the island. The island is not that long, right? We're talking 60 miles. So it's like, man, I really would like to go up to Nago. That's the northern city, right? Like I'd like to go up there, and I want to take a ferry to Miyako Island or to these other islands, or, I don't know if you can ferry to Miyako or if you have to fly, but there are so many other islands in that island chain that you can go visit and see that I didn't even realize.
I mean, a couple of them we can even drive to, I think.
Yeah, they have long bridges. And,
yeah, we never. All right, so we got to plan a trip to Okinawa.
Right.
That's on our to-do. I just spit.
There's so much. There's so much
visiting
more.
Other islands, Okinawan islands.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's just so much more to learn and explore. And I, as an adult, like I said, I have so many more questions and, thoughts and things I want to see that, more than I did when I was younger. Right. So it's like, I know the questions to ask, and I want to have conversations, and like, yeah, I think that will always be a part, I think, of my adult life. Like I always want to have some type of connection there. So.
And then I like to, I think all of us are trying to also, I guess, incorporate that with our children, like raising our children with awareness of that. And like, again, we've been very fortunate to be able to all of us have been able to take our children to Okinawa. So like, even like my kids, they will identify and say that they're Japanese or Okinawan, and like Aiden's like, oh, I'm the only Japanese person. So.
That's so cute. And it's so hard. Like, it's so hard because, they grow up, especially my kids are very mixed. Right. And so it's like, I try to, they call our parents though, Bachan and Ji-chan, like these are things that we want them to understand. But it's so funny. Noah the other day or a couple of weeks ago, he's like, and he's been to Okinawa, right? Like old enough to remember. I think he's been like twice,
a few times. Yes.
He said something about like, oh, Okinawa is part of Japan. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, how did you not know that? And he was like, kind of like, I was like, don't you know you're Japanese? like you're part of, and he was like, well, I knew. He was like, but then it made me think like, growing up, like I said, I didn't even understand the difference between Okinawan and Japanese until I was around his age and I went to Japan. For him, it's been the opposite. We emphasize the Okinawan part so much that the Japanese part is actually, you know, in the background. And so when he said that, it just kind of made me think, like, I was like, yeah, no, like, no, we've been there. And he was like, oh, well, we flew to Japan and then we went to Okinawa, and we've just always talked about Okinawa so much. That's just how he identifies, which I think is so interesting, right? So
because we say Okinawa, not Japan.
Right. And we just talk so much about Okinawa, right? Like it's so for him, that's how he identifies. It's just interesting how it'll carry on to the younger generations or the newer generations. So
we shall see. Well, I guess we should wrap up because we could probably talk about this all day long.
Right.
But is there anything else to talk about? There is. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No. I just thanks for having me, and sorry there were some
first guest
technical issues in the beginning. But I think that this is exciting, and these are the kind of conversations I think people who grew up the way that we grew up, these are the kind of conversations we want to have, especially as adults, right? Because it's such a part of who we were when we were younger, and not everybody understands it. You know what I mean? Not everybody, and at no fault of their own, but it's just, you know, our experiences. It's difficult to find somebody to talk to about these experiences who can really kind of connect and relate to what you're saying, and really understand. So something like this, you know, I'm excited to see where it goes, and looking forward to hearing all the conversations you're going to have with other people.
We shall see. So, all right. So I guess we'll end it here. Thank you for joining, and I'm going to stop recording.
Thank you.